Thanks for checking out this video. For a full list of materials used in this project, head down to the description below and click on Show More. We're going to start by making 5 petals for our flower. I have 4 of them here already done, so I'm going to show you here how to make it as I make my 5th petal. I have 2 contrasting colors of Delicas, and these are the 11 Delicas. And then I have, of course, my needle and thread. You don't need very much thread per piece that you make, per individual petal. But if you want to cut yourself a longer length, about 5 feet, you can continue working off of that. And then the needle can be a size 10 or 11. You just don't need anything as thin as a 12 unless you're just very comfortable working with a 12. So I'm going to start here by picking up one of my Delicas and just making this my stop bead. So just pass through that Delica. And you don't need very much tail thread. We're only going to use this thread to tie our ends together. So a couple inches should be plenty. And then I'm going to pick up in an alternating pattern my 2 colors of Delicas until I have 6 Delicas. So I started with my dark blue here. So I have dark blue, light blue, dark blue, light blue, dark blue, light blue. And I'm doing it in that alternating color because I like this checkerboard sort of pattern that I have on my petals here. You can change up the pattern to be whatever you'd like it to be, but I'm going to show you how to do the checkerboard pattern because I think that's just a really fun kind of overall pattern for the leaves on this project. And you want to have a total of 6 beads. And that's going to be your first row here of Delicas. We're going to pick up a second row of Delicas in the same pattern. So just dark, light, and dark light. So we've got 2 rows. I still have this on my needle here. I can let that fall down. And I picked up those beads in the same pattern. So I did dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, and the same for these. I'm now taking my needle and thread, and I'm going to go through the first set of 6 beads I picked up, starting with that stop bead and going out the top. And as I pull those together, I'll then have my first set or row of 6 beads sitting next to the second. Take your needle and thread and continue here through. You're going to pass up through that second row or set of 6 beads and come out the top. So now you should have 2 columns of beads sitting next to each other, and with that pattern being offset, so you have that checkerboard pattern starting. And I'm going to do a couple more rows like this. I'm going to do a total of 5 rows across. So my second one here, I'm going to do another, I'm going to pick up another 6 beads in that same alternating pattern. Do I have 6? I do. And now what I'm going to do here is go through that second set, that second column of beads, starting with the darker bead here, going out through the top, and allowing that new row or column of beads to sit next to the previous one. And I'm going to go down through the new set of beads and pick up another set of 6 beads. And this is just a simple ladder stitch, but you're picking up 6 beads, which may be not typical if you're used to doing ladder stitch. And I want to make sure that I keep this tight so I don't have a lot of slack in between each of these rows. And up through the new column of beads there. I've got 4, so I'm going to do one more. So I've got my dark light, and my dark light. And up through that previous row and down through the new row. So I have something that looks like a little square or rectangle with all of my beads in this checkerboard pattern. And I have 5 columns across and 6 beads in each of those columns. I'm now going to start tapering each end of that so that it becomes smaller on either end, and it gives me that petal or sort of like a lemon or an almond shape. So with my thread coming out of this last bead here, I'm going to pick up 2 beads. I'm now going to start a brick stitch. And I'm going to continue with this alternating color pattern. So my bead, my thread is coming out of a light bead. So I'm going to start with the dark, and I'm going to pick up a dark and a light. And you'll see this bridge thread, if you look straight down the center or straight down through the holes of the bead, you'll see this bridge thread going from hole to hole, bead to bead. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to skip that first bridge thread and go through the second bridge thread. And as you do that, it'll pull your 2 Delicas close to the columns here that you've created. And you'll see that the holes are kind of wanting to stick up. So your beads are already starting to want to fall in line with the rest of your beads. And we're just going to make sure that they stay that way. We're going to take our needle and thread and pass up through that lighter bead. And we're passing up through so that once we give it a nice little pull, the holes are sticking straight up. And so you can see that the beads, even though they are offset from the beads below, so they're kind of sitting offset like a brick pattern, but the holes running through the beads are all in alignment. So if you look straight down at your project, you can look right down through the holes of those beads. So I started by picking up 2 beads with my brick stitch, and I did my dark and my light. So now I'm going to pick up a dark and continue with this checker pattern. And I'm going to cross under the next bridge thread. And you can see now, as I do that, that bead wants to automatically sit just the way that it should. I'm going to pass up through that bead from the top to the bottom. I'm sorry, from the bottom to the top. So if I'm holding it like this, I'm going to go up through the top of the bead. And then pick up one more bead here, my light bead. And go through the next, go under the next bridge thread. And go from the bottom to the top, out through the top of that bead. And that is the first row of brick stitch that I'm adding onto this section of ladder stitch. You'll notice that I have 5 beads across here in the ladder stitch, and I only have 4 beads across in the brick stitch. And that's exactly what we want because we want to keep making that smaller. I'm going to start now the next row of the brick stitch. I'm coming out of a light color bead, so I'm going to pick up my dark and then my light, and I'm going to skip that first bridge thread and go underneath the second, and I'm going to go up through that second bead so that my holes are in alignment, and my holes in those beads are in alignment with the rest of the holes with all the other beads here. And now I'm going to pick up another dark bead and go under that bridge thread and up through that bead. So here now I only have 3 beads spanning across that the width of this petal here. Starting on the other side here, I'm going to pick up a light and a dark. I'm going to skip the first bridge thread, go through the second, which is also the last because I only have 2 bridge threads now, and up through that dark bead. So now I have just 2 beads here on this row of the brick stitch. So I'm going to pick up one of my light beads. I'm coming out of that dark bead and pick up one of my light beads and go down through the bead next to it, the light bead. And I'm also going to pass through all the other beads on the outside of my petal until I come out through the bead at the very corner of my project. And this is now going to start me in position to do the same thing that I just did here to taper this petal. I'm now going to do the same steps, repeat that same brick stitch on this side. So go ahead and get to this point here and then continue on this side, and you're going to mimic this and taper on this end. And at that point, we'll have our first petal finished. You can see now that I am almost done with my petal. I am at the point now where the only thing I have to do is add one more of my Delicas at the end. So I'm coming out one of my Delicas here, the last 2 that I added, and I'm going to pick up one of my Delicas, this one's the dark one, and go through the beads along the side. So now that I don't have this other side to add, the last time I did this, I went through the beads on the side and then was in position to add the second half of my petal. But now what I'm going to do is continue all the way around to the outside of my petal here and just follow all the beads on the edge. And I'm going to stop when I get to my tail thread. And at that point, I'm just going to tie off the thread. So just following all the beads on the edge, and this will just help pull everything together so you don't have any beads that are kind of sticking out or aren't anchored well. And I'm going to stop here because I am back to the beginning and my tail threads are together. So at this point I can tie a little knot. I'm going to do right over left, left over right. And once I feel that that is secure, I'm going to burn down my thread. So just like that. And just being careful to burn down only the threads that I want to burn, not anything that's actually still running through my beads and holding my project together. So at this point now, you should have a total of 5 petals. So you've made the 1, so you're going to continue on here and make another 4 until you get to that 5. And then we will put these together and anchor them on a nice ring here. Once you have all 5 of your petals, we're going to connect them together. I have a new piece of thread here. If you still have a good amount of thread left from the last petal, you can just continue to use that. So I'm going to start here by aligning my petals sort of in this circular pattern because this is the way that I want to pick them up. You can, if you'd like to, you can make sure that they're all facing the same way. You'll notice that they'll all have 2 dark beads at one side and 2 light beads at the other side. And I'm looking at the points here. So if you're interested in making sure that they align, you can see I have all of my light points here at the center and all of my dark points facing outwards. It's not important, only that it's if you want it to look one way or the other. If it's going to bother you, if it's not consistent, then you'll just want to pay attention to that. So I have it arranged here so that all my light points are in the center and dark on the outside. And all I'm going to do here is pick up each one of these petals through that last Delica at the point. Oops, and be careful. If you are picking them up all one way, facing all one direction, make sure you get that right. So now they kind of look like a little fish sort of hanging here on a fishing line here. So I've got all 5 now connected or picked up, and all I'm going to do is bring these down towards the end of my thread and leaving enough thread here that I can just grip the end and bring these together with a little knot. And make sure that you don't accidentally catch any of your Delicas in the knot. So here, now that I've got that tied off, I'm going to just lay these out so they sit correctly. And you can see there is now my connected flower. I'm going to go through, I'm going to find where my thread is, and I'm going to actually go up through the Delica next to where my bead is coming out, or next to where my thread is coming out. And through one more bead. So I've gone through all 5 center beads that were at the tip of each petal. I tied them off, and then I continued through 2 other beads, working my way up the side of that petal. Then on the petal next to it, on those same 2 beads, I'm going to go down through those same 2 beads. Oops. It can be a little tricky in here because the beads should be sitting next to each other kind of tightly. Oops. And I want to make sure that I'm getting the right beads here. So I'm going to go down through those 2 beads on the other side and continue through the bead at the tip of that petal and up through the next 2 beads along the edge of the petal. And down through the 2 beads, the same 2 beads here on the petal next to it. And all I'm doing here is just connecting these down here towards the center with a few more beads rather than just that center bead at the tip here. Because if I connect with just the beads at the tip, it could be a little flimsy. So adding this little extra connection point is going to really help. So I'm just, again, going up through 2 beads on one petal and then down through 2 beads on the other. And continuing through that center bead that was at the tip of my petal. So up through 2 and down through 2 until I get back to the beginning. Now that I have all 5 of my flower pieces, all 5 of the petals together, what I'm going to do now is add this piece. It's still pretty floppy, and I'm going to add it to a ring. So I'm going to anchor it on the ring at each of the petals. Take your needle and thread and pass up through the side of one of the petals, through all those beads on the side, until we get to the last bead that was part of that original ladder stitch that you did. So let me get through here and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So my thread should now be coming out. If you take a look at what at your petal here, you'll be able to see that you've got that center section of the original checkerboard that you made with the ladder stitch. And you want your thread to be coming out of that corner bead. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beads across, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beads across. So actually I'm one below. Let me go up one higher. It's a little bit tricky. So if you count, that will help you because it actually starts to look like it's tapering in a little bit before it actually does. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beads across here, and I'm coming out that last bead at the corner. And then I can, if I step up here, I can see the next row across has 4. So I know that I'm in the right position. My thread is coming out right between, at the corner here, right between the rows where I've got the 5, and then the 4 seed beads. So that's where you want to be. I'm going to lay my flimsy little flower here over the ring, and I'm going to take my needle and thread around the ring. Oops. Being careful, being careful not to drag the pliers with me. Keep those over there. So I've just taken my needle and thread and gone around the ring. And I'm going to go back down through the side of my petal. And as I do that, that should pull that loop around my ring tight. So I'm going to go down here and down until I get to my 2 Delicas that are sitting next to each other on opposite or on my petals that are next to each other. So from the top here, I'm going down. You can see here I've got my little loop here, and I'm coming down through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beads. So I'm coming down through that whole row of that first row of ladder stitch. And now I'm going to go up through the end or outside row of ladder stitch here on this next petal. And we're going to continue this the whole way around. So I'm going up through this row, or this kind of column, if you will, just because it's oriented the other way. But I'm going up through those 6 beads of the initial ladder stitch that I did. And I'm going to go around my ring to anchor. And then back down through those 6 beads in that ladder stitch. Now to get through, or to get to move on to the next side of the petal here, I'm going to continue around the outside of the petal through the beads that are tapering down to the point, through that center Delica at the point, and then up the other side. And through those 6 beads that were part of that ladder stitch, and again around the ring, and back down through those 6 beads. And pull tight. So now, because I'm going from one petal to the other, I'm going to just move on to this next petal here and go up through those 6 beads that are part of that ladder stitch, around my ring, and down through those 6 beads that are part of that ladder stitch. And now here I need to get to the other side of my petal. So I'm just going to continue working through all the beads that are on the outside of the petal, through the center, and continue until I come back up through the bead that I need to on the ladder stitch. And again around the ring and down through the beads of the ladder stitch. So if you've kind of caught on to the pattern here, I'm now going to connect to the beads of the ladder stitch here on this next petal. So every time I'm going between petals, I'm just connecting the beads, those 6 beads of the ladder stitch. And then when I'm moving from one side of the petal to the other, I'm going to follow all those beads here that are on the inside point of that petal and then back up through that ladder stitch. So just going through those beads, just depending on if I'm going from one petal to the other or I'm crossing to the other side of the petal. So I'm going to continue here doing this until I've got all of my points anchored. So you'll see on the back here, you should have something like this. I've got my petals anchored to my ring here on either side, and I'm using those Delica beads that were part of that ladder stitch. So continue going around here until you've got the whole thing anchored, and then we will embellish the center a little bit and make this into an earring. Now that you have your flower anchored to your ring, we can start to do some more embellishment on the flower. And I'm going to do something sort of simple here. I don't want to get too crazy with it, but you can get as crazy as you want. You can even do another flower and lay it on, sort of offset it. You can do a mini version of the flower and put that in the center. Lots of different things you can do, including stacking a lucite flower from one of the vintage collections that we have. Anything to sort of layer and add some more interest to the center. I'm going to keep this one pretty simple. And I'm going to take my needle and thread here, and I want to be coming out of one of the beads at the center. So I'm going to take my needle and thread through the beads along the side of my flower until I'm coming out through one of those Delicas that is at the tip here of that petal, one of the 5 that is connected in the center. And I'm going to use a very basic technique here and pick up, I'm actually going to use some 15-0s as well as my little 3mm rounds here. So I'm going to grab a few of these. And I'm going to pick up one of my 3mm rounds, a 15-0. And I'm going to skip the 15-0 and go through the 3mm round and back through the Delica. And this will simply add a little 3mm bead coming out of the center. I'm going to go through the next Delica in the center here and repeat the same thing. So I'll have a little cluster of these 3mm beads at the center, which will give it a look sort of like an orchid or any kind of flower that's got a nice little center there, a nice full center. Maybe it's not an orchid. I might be getting my flowers confused here. In the comments below, if anybody wants to comment and let me know what they think this looks like, I am all ears. I'm always curious to know what people see when they see the projects that I do. So I'm just continuing around here and adding one 3mm bead to each of the Delicas in the center. You could try a 2 or a 4mm bead, but 3 was about the size that just seemed to fit nicely in here without getting too bunched up or having too much extra space. and pull tight. You want to make sure that you don't have any of that slack in your thread. Oh, got to go through my next Delica bead. And a 3mm, a 15L. Down through that 3mm and back through the Delica at the center. So this is the most minimal way that I would embellish this. And you can see it's kind of got this nice little 3D effect. It looks very much like a daffodil to me with the trumpet coming out the center. So you could use some bigger beads, you can embellish this more, make it like fluff it up a little bit if you want to. You can do all kinds of things. This would actually be beautiful in the colors of a daffodil. You can make a series of these and then connect them and have a nice, beautiful daffodil necklace in the front here. Before moving on to finishing this and adding my earring, my hook earring, I'm going to add one more of my beads in the center. I'm coming out of one of the Delicas, and I'm going to pick up my 3mm and another 15-0. And then I'm going to go back down through the 3mm. And now here, to get the bead to span across the center and sit nestled in the center of this group of 5, I'm actually going to then go through one of the Delicas that sits across from the Delica that my thread is already coming out of. So I'll actually go through the Delica here and kind of go through this. Kind of helps if you angle your needle and thread down through the project and pull this gently so that as you pull your thread, it will pull this into position so that your new, your 6th 3mm round will then get pulled into the center of that little group of 5. And that gives you a nice round center there, kind of fills it out and takes up that space in the center so you don't have a little hole there. So now at this point, we are pretty much done with the basic version of this. And I'm only calling it basic because you can embellish this as much as you want. You can do layers and you could do an additional brick stitch around the edge if you wanted to. You can make a smaller version, have that hang down. There's really all kinds of different things you can do. It's a great kind of component for necklaces, of course, earrings is what I'm making today. You could do a bracelet, all kinds of fun things that you can do with this. So at this point now, all I have to do is tie off my thread. And my thread tails happen to be next to each other already. So I'm just going to go ahead and tie this off. And if your thread tails aren't next to each other, you can just pass through a couple beads to get those tails to meet. And just tying this off, I like to do left over right, right over left. And where did I put my, here we go. Okay. Thread burners. Sometimes they go missing among all the various things I have sitting around me here. And just burn that down. So there is our finished component. You can now add an earring hook to this. I'm using one of the copper to match the copper or rose gold. Copper and rose gold would kind of go together for this. So if you're going to do copper or rose gold like I am, you can kind of use those interchangeably depending on what you have available. Now I can hook this a couple different ways, but to get it to hang exactly the way that I want it, I'm going to just twist open the end of my fish hook. And then I'm going to take my fish hook and I'm going to go down through, oops, got that backwards. I'm going to take my fish hook and just connect through the ring between, so that I'm catching that ring that's sitting behind the petal. So your petal should be flexible enough to allow you to put that fishhook in there and then just gently close that. And so there I have the completed piece, and I've made it into an earring. If you enjoyed this video, please comment below and let us know your thoughts. You can also subscribe to our channel to be notified as soon as we have more beading tutorials out that you will enjoy probably just as much as you enjoyed this one.